We're back again for another podcast. We have Shayna here again. We're going to talk more about kind of the stuff we talked about in the last podcast. But first, I want to point out that we are now in the top 10% of all podcasts that have ever existed. It's very exciting.
What?
Yes. So if you weren't aware of this, 90% of all podcasts, sorry, I thought the mic cut out. 90% of all podcasts don't make it past episode 3. And we have made it to episode 4. So that puts us in the top 10% ever.
Yay! Insert cheer noise here.
Yes.
It's exciting.
So anyway, the subject matter of this podcast is going to be basically addressing some of the questions and comments that we received in the first podcast. We got a resounding response. I honestly don't think I've ever gotten any more messages or comments or just general reaction of any video that I've made. And I've made videos that have done 7-8 million views. And I make one podcast with her, of all people, and we get the response.
I just think people are a lot more interested in people's lives than we think they are. Like, why do you think vlogs do so well?
Yeah.
You know, people just love to see and learn more about people's like every day. So I think having the platform that you've had and you've only shared snippets of like your experience in your life for people to have an opportunity to like sit down with you and like learn more about you and your story, I think is why people love it so much.
Yeah, it kind of pulled the curtain back and so people could see, who the real Matt Graham is.
Who the real not Matt Graham is.
Who the real not Matt Graham is. Anyway, so we're going to address some of the questions that we got. One of the clips that was posted onto TikTok did quite the numbers. It got around 700,000 views. I could check right now, but I'm not going to do that.
I feel like the last time I saw it, it was like 200. And I was like, whoa, it's really at 7?
Yeah, this was earlier today. Last I saw it was at like 640. So I'm assuming that it's growing at the same pace and it's at 700 now. But irrelevant. The point is we got a lot of comments and very mixed comments too.
Yeah.
So we got a lot of women that were shitting on me and a lot of men that were shitting on Shayna. And of course, this is a 40-second clip that was posted onto TikTok. So a lot of these people didn't even watch the original podcast.
Right.
So they have no context.
Mm-hmm.
Half of them didn't even know that the story she was telling, which it was, by the way, it was the clip of her giving me the ultimatum. If you watched the last episode, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't watched that episode, go watch it now. It'll be linked in the description. Or if you're listening on Spotify, just go to the last one.
Backwards.
Just go back one. And yeah, so a lot of people were making some pretty harsh judgments of our situation based on a 40-second clip. And you can't really give much weight to that. You can't put much stock in that. I got one of the people that commented on it asked me how it feels reading some of the comments that I was reading, because some of them were pretty harsh, which I've built a tolerance to at this point because I've been, on the internet doing what I do for not only the decade plus that I've been doing it, but more in the public eye in the last, 6 to 8 months. You get some pretty mean comments and it is what it is. But yeah, I mean, people just, they look at a 40-second clip and they make a judgment on a 7-year situation, and you got to take it with a grain of salt. So with that being said, we're going to dive into a lot of what the comments were and the general ideas and topics that people were sort of talking about in the comments of that video, as well as some other questions that we got via Instagram, YouTube, Discord. By the way, if you're not in my Discord server, it's 100% free. Just go to my Discord. Just go to the link in the bio. There's no bio on
YouTube.
On YouTube. I'm so used to saying link in bio, but I'm like, wait a minute, it's in the description. It is not on YouTube. It is in the description. And if you don't know what I'm talking about and you're on Spotify or iTunes or whatever other audio only platform, just go to notmattgraham.com and you can find it there. With that being said, the first sort of comment that I saw a lot was that, you should have left me, or that I'm a piece of shit, or something like that, something along those lines. And I think, and they were mostly women, by the way. And I think a lot of the women that said that have every right to say that. I think that if you're in a situation where your boyfriend, fiance, husband, whatever the case, is completely non-existent within the responsibilities of the relationship, then that's something that you should seriously consider. But again, I think a lot of them didn't even realize that, it was from 4 years ago and things were different. So
they did not have the full context.
They didn't have the full context, but I kind of want to dive into that, a little bit about, why didn't you leave me, and why, and if somebody else is in that scenario, why shouldn't they, or why should they, what things should they be thinking about, in terms of deciding, am I going to leave? Am I not going to leave? What would you suggest to other people? And what kind of was your thought process in that scenario?
I think, and to answer your first question, why I didn't leave you, it wasn't like I didn't know for sure, like I have to stay with him. Like I didn't have this mission in my mind where like I had to rescue him or save him or never leave him. Like I wasn't that, it wasn't from that place. It was more like, and I think I mentioned it in the original video, is that any problem he and I have ever had, if it was he was coming up short, I was coming up short, we had a problem, a disagreement, something like that. Obviously, given if you watched the first video, you saw how much of a transitional period he was in. Like he was sorting all this out, and it was all his figuring out how to handle his anxiety and all that. And I was trying to figure it out too as his partner. So I think it's, you have to, when you express your concerns and frustrations with someone that you love, whether it's a boyfriend, girlfriend, friend, mom, parent, whatever, if that other person is not willing to receive that information and one, question, am I the problem here? And two, am I willing to do what I can to fix it? And with Matt, that's always been the case. He has always owned up to where he's fallen short, whether he likes to or not, or even if he didn't even say it, he would hear me. I would see the wheels turning in his mind. He wasn't just sitting there rolling his eyes and getting all frustrated with me. And we never had to talk about it again. You got to be reasonable. You can't expect the problem to be fixed overnight if it's something as crazy as handling anxiety. But he always put the work in. And, I'm a pretty reasonable person. Again, I'm not going to expect him to be fixed by the next time we go out or the next time we do something where anxiety could be provoking him. But that was a huge thing for us. And that's what we kind of always said, like, as long as we show up for one another and we're putting in the work to get to where we want to be, then I have no reason to leave. We're all human. We all make mistakes. We all go through hard times. And that brings me to my next point, which is you have to know where you want to go. Right? Like you have to have some sort of goal. You can't just kind of be flailing about just, it's a Wednesday, you have a crappy Wednesday and then, you just figure out Thursday. It's like, well, we kind of had this point in our relationship where what do we want? Do we want the same things? What does that look like? How are we going to get there? And then we'll maybe dive more into this. I don't want to go on too long of a tangent, but like, and what are our roles in getting ourselves to that place? So for us, it was always, once we figured out that we can open communication very well, we can listen to each other's critiques and talk about where each other's falling short without becoming defensive and egotistical. We always showed up and put in the work. And as soon as, the work started to dip and we started to go back into bad habits or things like that, we talk about it and we opened it to communication. And those conversations were not always easy. And I recall many a nights where we were up in bed till 3:00 in the morning, just having these horrible, stressful, brutal talks. But I mean, at some point you have to know if as long as that person's showing up and listening to you and going in the same direction that you two want to go in, then it's worth fighting for. But as soon as that work stops is where you have to be able to reel it in and say, there's only so much I can do here, and you have to make the hard decisions to possibly back off.
But why even go through that? Why because if you're in your position, right, you're 25, 26 years old at the time, and you're with this 21, 22-year-old that has no money. He has nothing going on. Sure, he has potential. And one of the comments that I saw was at the top was don't date potential. So
Yeah.
I kind of want you to
That's
talk
why
about
grandma
that.
said, don't fall in love with potential.
Right. So if you're in your position and I'm sort of at, let's say, rock bottom is a relative term. Some people's rock bottom is different than other people's rock bottom. But for me, that was rock bottom. Why stick it out? Why even entertain that? Because on the flip side, you could have, and I don't want you getting any ideas. You could have dumped me and gone and found some well put together 31-year-old that had things going on, that had a sense of humor, that had all the things that I have. Why even put yourself through that?
Yeah. We've even had these conversations in the last few years. And it's like, I still to this day, there was not some sign from God that was like, stay with him. He's the one, he's your person. There were so many times where I was like, is this it? Like, was my role here in his life just to get him to, a certain place and then we veer off because we're not able to give each other what we need? And I'll be honest with you guys, there was no sign. There was no anything that was like, stay, like you can do this, like help him, just stay. Like he'll get through it. Like there's the light at the end of the tunnel. Like there was none of that ever. And when I ask myself that question, it's like the only thing that comes to my mind, and this is all because it's my experience and it's who I am as a person, like knowing how much I loved him, whether as a boyfriend and as a person, like I just wanted the best for him. I knew that I had the capabilities to the patience and kind of the communication and the ability to like talk to him and provide him comfort, I guess, that regardless of whether or not we broke up, we didn't stay together. I moved back with my parents. He stayed at Doug and Emily's, whatever it was. I knew that like I didn't ever want to just leave him on the side of the road because I don't think you do that to people that you love. So that's what it comes back to for me. Like I just knew whether we were going to stay together or not wasn't really what my biggest concern was. It was like at the end of the day, whatever happens between us, I couldn't forgive myself if 10 years from now someone said, oh, what happened with you and Matt? And I just left him and never spoke to him again. Oh, he had crazy anxiety and like he would lose his mind and go nuts and get nervous if I went out. So we just broke up. Like that to me was not an option.
So was it more a feeling of responsibility to me to help me get through it?
I think responsibility is a weird word. I think it was just like a moral conflict for me. It was like, we were, and it's, I also, you have to kind of think of where we were at the time. Like to be fair, like we had picked up everything we knew and moved to Florida and had not much, we were starting over as far as like our personal lives, finances, where we were living, what we were going to do. Like, and you got to kind of give people a little bit of time to like figure that out. Right. So there was that aspect too. It's not like it was 3 years of him sitting around smoking weed, playing video games, asking me to Venmo him money for that long of time. I mean, it was a reasonable transitional time, but it was tough. It was really hard. And that's part of it too, right? Like we weren't in that place for, again, 3 years. It was like a good year and a half.
I would say the worst of it lasted probably like 8 to 9 months.
Yeah.
And then, things started to improve. I think once we got into 75 hard around that time when like taste buds was starting to become a thing and we were starting to get into our groove, I think that's when things started to pick up a little bit.
Yeah.
But initially those first, between my first going down, because obviously we had trouble in the beginning and whatnot, but like the lowest of the low was like probably like 60 days prior to moving to Florida and probably the next 6 months after that.
July 2018 was horrible, which was when we moved.
Yep.
And the move was fun, right? Because you start over, new house, new things, new shopping, blah, blah, blah. No one has real responsibilities. You can kind of just go off and enjoy life for, we had maybe a couple months to do that. And then it got to crunch time. So
reality
you subtract those like 4-ish months of fun. And then from, maybe it was like the start of 2019, holiday season. And then into 2019 was when things really got tough. And then I think I'd agree, like that full year-ish were brutal. But again, like, and it's not like he'd have a bad day of smoking weed, doing nothing, and then I'd just drill him, right? This was compounding time. So you have to get You have to kind of give people their space to figure out their low points and what they're going to do. And then if they do nothing, if they act on nothing, if the first request was, can I have $20 because I need to fill my gas tank, turns into 3 months later, I need $300 because I've now back charged or I overdrafted in my Venmo account. And now I need $200 or $250 to pay it back. And then an additional 50 to put, like when it starts to snowball like that, that's when you pump the brakes and then you have the hard conversations. And from that point, if that person that you're communicating with is no longer willing to put in the work or doesn't make any effort to change and push you to in a positive direction, what are you going to do? You can't drown with them. You have to at some point just do what you can to keep your slate clean and do what's right, which is, again, I'm speaking from my own perspective. I tried to always do what was right by him and by us. And if I was giving and not just financially, but communication and in all the ways that I could, and he wasn't reciprocating it to the best of his ability at the time, then, there's only so much you can do. And I was afraid that I was going to get to that point where I had to call it, and it terrified me. None of me wanted that, but you have to protect yourself. So for all the people that were saying you should have left, a lot of people even said, I'm in the same exact place right now with my boyfriend or my husband.
Yeah. So that was my next question, which was, a lot of people were saying this, I'm in this exact situation right now. And obviously there are a lot of, because people only saw the part where you were saying that I was smoking weed and playing video games while you were working. That was kind of the meat and potatoes of the video. And so there are a lot of reasons that can stem. For me, it was anxiety. For others, it can be depression. For others, it can be, something else. And so if somebody's in that position, the advice I would say is not going to be the same depending on the scenario, because if it was just like, if you came to me and were just like, get your shit together, well, that's a different conversation, because it was more of a trying to figure out how to, fix myself mentally. Of course, getting my shit together was the thing that ended up being the thing. But at the time, I didn't think that that was a solution of just like, being a responsible adult. But general advice, I guess, if somebody, they say, that's my scenario right now, what do I do?
I mean, everyone's stories and relationships and paths and time frames are so different. It's so hard to put like a blanket statement out there. But
what would not be a bad idea to do?
Communication. Learn how to communicate what's bothering you. Like he just addressed, like if your husband has been sitting around doing nothing all day, your bills aren't getting paid, things are getting stressful. You don't just come home and say, I've had enough of this. You're a lazy piece of shit. You've done nothing. That's not the approach. It's you need to learn. And there was plenty of frustration that I had to turn down and turn up the compassion and turn up the teamwork. Like,
but it's also not coddling either.
No, you can't coddle, because then, especially as a man, in my experience, you can't coddle a man, because then it's just so degrading to them that you have to come at it as a level team player. In the same way Tom Brady would go to Rob Gronkowski or Julian Edelman. He wouldn't call them fucking idiots for missing a pass.
Tom Brady might. There's some clips going around that.
But you have to learn to communicate. And this is in any relationship, your sister, your mom, your whatever. If there's something that's bothering you, you have to address it and say, this is what I've been feeling like lately. And this is what I want to talk to you about. Because if I'm not communicating, then how are you supposed to know that this is bothering me? You can't let it get to a boiling point. Because if it gets to a boiling point, all rationality and patience that you may have had is gone, because you've let things get to such a brutal level. So first thing is just learn how to communicate. Maybe for some people need to write, some people need to write things down and maybe write a letter or things like that. But just sit down and talk to that person with patience and grace, and just because you can't get anything accomplished if you come at people guns blazing. I've witnessed, relationships and communication in a way that who can throw the hardest jab, who has the nastiest left hook to get their point across. It's like, and something that Jordan Peterson brings up, was it Jordan Peterson? Yeah. Is your goal in a relationship, especially a romantic one, but friends, same deal. Your goal in an argument or in a communication thing is not to win, right? Like,
You can't win.
You can't win because then cool. Like I said all these nasty things to him. I got my point across. I sounded real good. If it was like a highlight reel, like it would have went viral, cool. But like now he's defeated. Now he's deflated. Now he feels horrible. And now I'm married to a loser. And I don't mean like what a loser. I mean like he's now in this place of just like defeat. And that's not where you want your person that you're building a life with to feel and to live in. Right. So to approach a relationship or a conversation in a way that's like, I'm going to get him, like I'm going to get my point across and I'm going to win this. It's like, no, reel it back, like pump the brakes, back to the drawing board. Like, how are you feeling? Because a person can't tell you that you don't feel a way that you do. So a lot of times if you approach this conversation, I've been feeling really overwhelmed lately. I've been feeling like I've been working as much as I can. I've been saving as much money as I can. Whatever your reasons for your argument is, let's say you're in a tough financial place and your partner's not helping. You know, I'm trying to do the best that I can. And I feel like I'm confused on where you're at or, you know, what's going on your end. You know, are you having a hard time at work if they're working? You know, have you been looking? What can we do to get you to a place to where we need you to be to get to A, B, or C? You know, like you have to approach it as a team. And I get it. Like it's hard to do that. You really got to rise above and like put your frustrations aside. But I mean, it's such a hard conversation as it is to approach it in any other way. It's just it makes it so much harder, you know?
Yeah. When you're having difficult conversations with people about really emotional topics, there is how you want to say it. And then there's how it's going to best be received. Mm-hmm. And so it's challenging and you have to, like she said, set yourself aside momentarily. But if you want to actually achieve the goal, if you want to, you know, get somewhere and make progress, then you're not going to be able to say it the way you want to say it. Because I'm sure she wanted to come to me and scream in my face and tell me that I'm a lazy piece of shit loser. Maybe not those exact words, but something like that, something a little more aggressive than I was probably ready to hear. And so again, it's not coddling, but you have to go to them in a way that they're going to receive it. And so when she talks about situations where people are just trying to throw the hardest punch that they can so that they can get their point across, it's like, yeah, you got your point out, but it didn't get across. It was never received, you know, especially for men. And you have to, if you're in a relationship with somebody, you have to realize how they're motivated. You have to realize what makes them tick. And so for Shayna, for example, I know that she likes positive affirmation. She likes being told
my
that
love language is words of affirmation and acts of service.
Right. So if I want you to keep doing something that I like, let's say it's, you know, folding the laundry, right? If I like it when you fold the laundry because I don't like folding the laundry, when you don't fold the laundry, I'm not going to come to you and say, why didn't you fold the laundry? Instead, when you do fold the laundry, I'm going to say, thank you for folding the laundry. I really appreciate it. You did a really good job, which by the way, I never do. And I'm terrible.
I'm like sitting here like, oh, that'd be nice. No.
Right. But like if I, cause you always fold the laundry, by the way, which I never say I appreciate, but I do because I hate folding the laundry. But in any event, if there was a certain behavior that I wanted her to do more, the way to get her to do that is by telling her how much I appreciate it and how much I enjoy it when she does that thing. Not berate her in the absence of that activity, you know? And so, especially when you're dealing with men. So if you're that woman in that scenario where your boyfriend's being a lazy piece of trash, you don't want to go to him and make him feel this small. You can't go to him and make him feel worse than he already is. You need to make him feel like he can be so much bigger than he is, right? That's the messaging. It's not, you're this, you're that, you're a piece of trash, you're never going to be anything, blah, blah, blah. It's like, I know how good you can be. I know how successful you can be. I know how hard you can work. Why aren't you doing it? What can I do to help you? And sure, it might not be the most authentic version of how you feel, but if you want to actually get the needle going, if you actually want to get things moving, that's how you got to approach it.
And it's a shame because I think so many people lack the ability to communicate. And obviously everyone can talk and communicate and say things back and forth, but I mean, I'm hearing you say that, and it's the perfect advice, and it's how we've gotten to where we are. But I just know, like, so many people are listening to this, and like, you know, their boyfriend or their girlfriend doesn't receive information well, and they don't have the drive or the motivation to get out of bed and like do something about it and put themselves out there and take risks. So it's hard. So I mean, back to those people who got divorces about this stuff or are currently in this situation right now, like, you have to take the temperature of your own relationship. Like, we can't possibly sit here and say, give it 3 more months and see what happens. Like, you know, how long have you been doing this for? How long have you been here? What's the temperament of the person that you're with? Does that person possess the qualities of the person that you want to build a life with? Do you want to raise a family with this person? You know, and if you love that person so much and you can see more potential in them, are you willing to put in the work and the partnership that it's going to take to lift that person and get them to where they're going to be? So it's just, it's a lot of internal. You gotta figure out what you're willing to sacrifice and the work that you're willing to put in to help the people you love the most. So if you've been doing this for 5 years, your husband is a deadbeat, he doesn't help with the kids, he doesn't make money, he has no motivation, he has no discipline, then you can only change, you can't really change people. You can try to influence them, you can lead by example, you can, you know, ask for things, you know, communicate what you need. But at the end of the day, like, people are who they are. So it's heartbreaking to see those comments of people being like, I'm here right now. Like, what do I do? Like, this is exactly where I am. And it just makes my stomach turn because I know what it's like to be there, obviously. So it's so hard. It's so hard to say, but yeah.
Yeah. And if you're a woman or a wife or a girlfriend or a fiance of a deadbeat loser that we're talking about, you can't approach them the way that I'm about to approach them because they're going to view it as nagging. But I'm about to talk to these guys. You are being a lazy piece of trash. You need to be disciplined. You need to get off your phone or your video game or whatever it is. Get off your ass and start being a man. Okay, next.
Yeah.
So I can say that. They can't.
And we don't need to go down that tangent, but when you do that, you will feel fulfilled. You just will. You know, like,
yeah, everything that, all the confidence and all the purpose and meaning that you're looking for is on the other side of the suffering that you're avoiding. It's on the other side of getting up early and going to the gym and getting the work done as soon as possible and actually giving it your all. Because where confidence comes from, it doesn't come from like this magical thing in the sky, right? It comes from thinking a certain way about yourself and actually being it, right? Having this thesis of like, I am a good basketball player. And then if you go out there and you suck at basketball, you're not going to be very confident in your ability to play basketball. So that's going to sting a little bit if your identity is wrapped up in your ability to play basketball. But if you do the work and put the work in, then you actually prove yourself right. And you say, I am a good basketball player. That's part of my identity. This is, of course, just an example. And you become that, then you're going to have this inner peace. You're going to have this like sense of like, like, I don't feel like a fraud, you know? And where that lack of confidence comes from, it's in feeling like a fraud. It's in feeling like, you know, I want to be this person, or I think I am this person, or, you know, I have this vision of who I could be, and I'm just not at all that person.
Right. And I think the missing piece that people struggle with like lack of confidence is like, sometimes you got to ask yourself the hard questions and be like, what work have I done to have any confidence? You know, like, if you're not confident that you're, you know, a good husband, like, have you been a good husband? Like, have you done anything to warrant you being called a good husband so that you can then wear that badge? Like, I'm a good husband. I treat my wife with respect and love, and I'm a great dad because you know, like, that's the thing. Like, and a lot of our confidence issues or insecurities come from the truth of the fact that we're not putting the work in to then wear those as a badge of honor. So it's hard truths, and the truth shall set you free. And it's just factual, you know?
Yeah, you can bullshit other people all day long, but you know what's actually true on the inside. And so you can run around saying that you are this person but deep down, you know who you really are.
Right.
And it's funny. There are so many guys that come to me and they're like, I don't have any money. I'm overweight. I, don't know how to talk to girls. I can't look people in the eye. I have all these, I have this litany of things that I am terrible at that I would like to be good at. How do I find confidence? And I'm like, how do you possibly expect yourself to be confident? You are falling short in every single area of life. How could you possibly be confident? It's just baffling to me that people think that confidence is like
something you're born with.
Genetic.
Like a confidence fairy just walks in and boop, like, you're confident. Like
Right.
confidence, I think what Tim Kennedy says, you kind of said it earlier, is success is on the far side of hard work. Like, or on the far side of failure. Like you have to put in the reps and put in the work to then earn. Confidence is earned. It's not just something that you wake up with. If you want real confidence, there are plenty of people out there that have the fake confidence, and those are the ones that go to bed at night full of anxiety because they're not who they say they are. But
Right.
confidence is best when it's earned, because then it's authentic and it's real, and that's when it bleeds into every other area of your life where you're deserving of it. So
Yeah, and it's funny because like when in the lower parts of my life, in the times when I had the least amount of confidence, it's because when I was 17, 18, 19, and I was in a position where I was doing well in life, I had a good job, I was, in shape, I was exploring new areas of life, I was taking risks, I was doing all these cool things. I had genuine confidence in myself. And then we moved to Florida. I didn't have a job. I became out of shape. And I still maintained that version of myself in my head. In my head, I was still that guy that I was when I was 19. But when I was 22, I was the opposite of that guy. And so it's that absence of being who I think I am that really causes that lack of confidence and that inner anxiety about, who you are. And I felt this, multiple times since sort of turning it around, like, especially if I'm in the public eye, I feel it on this podcast right now, right? Like I do my short form videos and I speak eloquently and I say everything perfectly. It's because I film them. I say the same phrase 50 times in a row until I get every single word right, every single inflection right, everything perfectly. I don't script them. I come up with them on the spot, but I want to make sure that I say it the way that I meant to say it and every single word is intentional. That can't be done on a podcast. And so I have that sense of who I am, that way of talking that everyone expects me to do. And it's not there in a long form podcast because it's, first of all, not realistic unless you're Russell Brand. That's the only.
he's like not even a real person. Like he's up there with David Goggins as far as like, how are you
how do you
human?
exist? He's like a WWE character.
For real.
But
yeah, we could talk about that forever. Just like that whole.
Well, and like, think about like how much we talk about fitness. It's like, do I look like somebody that works out every single day? No. Does that affect my confidence? Yes. Am I working hard to get myself in a position where I do look like somebody who is an athlete that, practices what he preaches? And I think, in the macro sense, we do practice what we preach. But of course, we're normal. We're human beings. We value fitness. It's very high on the hierarchy of our needs. But we fall off sometimes, and that hinders our progress. And so when I'm sitting on the internet, talking about, you got to be in shape, you got to get stronger, you got to do this, you got to do that. It's like, yeah, I'm doing all that, but I'm not where I know I could be. And so that, again, going back to that sort of theme of a lack of confidence being because you aren't who you say you are or think you are, portray yourself as. And those are just a couple examples of where I feel it, in my day-to-day life now. So it doesn't go away. It just, they become different.
Right.
And it gets better, obviously. Like you work hard to embody the idea of yourself or that ideal version of yourself. But the beauty of it is, and the fun of it is, it's an endless pursuit, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So there's always going to be things you're insecure about. There's always going to be things that you wish were better about yourself.
Right. Because whenever you level up, you're in a new arena now. So you're in the little leagues, just trying to like do a 20-minute workout without dying. And then you crush that 20-minute workout. And now you're in 45-minute workouts. And now you're in a whole new ball game. You're with different players. You have different standards. So that's the best advice that I was ever given. And Sal Frisella said this for the first time. And then when I asked Lexi how she, like Lexi J Wellness on Lexi Johnson, how she made all her success in like just like under 2 years of becoming an athlete and all that stuff. The best advice is to fall in love with the process. Like stop thinking about the top of the mountain. Stop thinking about that you need to have that instant gratification in 6 weeks, you know, like fall in love with waking up every day in the grind and just like doing the stuff you don't want to do, overcoming those negative thoughts and pushing through the hard work. Because when you stop focusing on the end result, I mean, have it on your sight, you know, you don't want to lose sight of what your why is, why you're doing what you're doing. But just fall in love with the process. Stop being miserable about your workouts. Stop being miserable about your day job or the things that you have to do that you don't want to do. It's like just flip it on its head and change your mindset. And when you approach it as falling in love with the process, falling in love with the work, falling in love with overcoming the things that you didn't want to do and you crushed it, and you now have a new threshold, right? So you couldn't do 1 push-up. Now you're doing 10. Now, cool, go for 20. You know what I mean? Fall in love with that grind. And when you flip your mindset like that, it bleeds into every other area of your life. And it's your relationships, your work, your parents, your everything, you know? And I think that's like such a benefit. That's always stuck with me. And like, you know, that clip that Andrew Tate has, it's like, I think, what's that kid's name that he always messes with? Aiden
Ross.
Yeah. He was like, Andrew, how do I get a 6-pack? Like super fast. He's like, why does it have to be fast? Why does it have to be overnight? Right now? Why does it have to be right now? Why can't it be hard? Why can't it be hard work? You know what I mean? We've, as a culture, as a society, as a generation, like we've just gotten so far away from the idea of working hard for something. You know, we want to just wake up and be that confident person that you see on the internet, but it's like, it's not realistic. It's not real. You know, go after things that are meaningful and that give you purpose and that, you know, you've earned, you know, stop looking for instant gratification.
Yeah. And this is why I love 75 hard so much. And we're on 75 hard right now. What's today? Like day 27 or something like that.
Something like that.
So the reason why I love 75 hard is for 2 reasons. And I was talking to Steve about this yesterday. The first reason is I'm not actually going to talk about the first reason because I could go on for 15.
We'll do a whole podcast on just 75 hard.
I could go on for the first reason for 20 minutes minimum. So I'm going to leave that for the next podcast or a future podcast. But the reason I bring it up is because it forces you to do something you don't want to do for 75 days. And you start to see the results of the process. You start to see the results of the grind, because the problem is what happens with so many people is they'll set out on a journey. They'll set out on a goal. They will do something for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and then they don't see the progress that they want, and then they stop. That's what happens 99.999% of the time. But 75 hard, it pushes you to 75 days, right? And that's important because 2.5 months is long enough to start to see some of the results, both the mental and the physical results of going through the grind of the same thing every single day, the monotonous tasks, especially when you don't want to do them in conditions you don't want to do them in. Once you get to the other side of that and you can check off that 75th day and you say to yourself, holy shit, I did it. And look at how much different I am now as a person, mentally, physically, than I was at the beginning of this. That changes something in your brain. That literally changes your perspective of reality. It makes you understand what falling in love with the process is. It makes you understand that, like, okay, even if I don't see the results of what I'm doing now, I now have a different threshold of patience. I have a different threshold of like, you know, I'm actually going to see this through, you know, because I know that if I do, regardless of how I feel that day, or whether the sun is shining or it's downpouring or there's a hurricane outside, right? Like, regardless of the conditions, regardless of how I feel, regardless of what can change between now and the end date of whatever I'm committing to, you have been through the process before, so you can go through the process again. Whether it be in business, whether it be in fitness, whether it be another round of 75 Hard, or you're doing the Live Hard program, or whether you're, whatever it is, that flip, that switch flip in your brain when you complete 75 Hard, or just any other program like that, or just any difficult task that takes a long period of time to do, where there's a lot of monotony and a lot of not fun in the middle of it. Getting to the other side of that, you don't see life the same way anymore. Yeah. And that's why I always say to people when they ask me, oh, should I do 75 Hard? I'm like, dude, if I could wave a magic wand and have every single person on earth do 75 Hard, I would. Mm-hmm. So I highly recommend it. It's 100% free to do. I don't know what the link is to check that out, but
episode 208 on Andy Frisella's podcast.
Sure. Yeah.
I've sent it to, 100 people. So I know exactly what the number is. He went through the whole Live Hard program. So it's episode 208 on Real AF on.
If you could ask me now, what is one thing, just one thing that I can do to change my mindset, to change my body, to change how I view the world, it is 75 Hard. That is the one 100%. Thing. If that's it. Mm-hmm. That's all you need.
You'll never be the same. If you do it the right way, if you complete it, you do it to the T, no excuses, no deviations, nothing like that. You do exactly as Andy has said to do. It's very freaking simple. You'll never be the same. You just won't. For better and for worse. We've talked about this, but again, we'll go into that podcast.
Yeah, we'll have a whole 75.
We should totally do a 75 Hard podcast.
We'll have a whole 75 Hard podcast. Yeah.
And we've completely gone off the rails as far as like a relationship standpoint podcast, but it's okay because all this stuff's super relevant. Yeah, it all bleeds into each other.
So I guess we'll transition back into the relationship stuff. We actually have a lot more to talk about, which, hey, this is great for watch time.
This is great.
It's great. So, okay. We covered if this is my boyfriend right now. Okay, so a lot of people were saying, especially the men, right? I'm sure this is the Andrew Tate crowd that was saying this, that she was sitting there complaining that I was being a piece of trash, and she was doing all the providing and she was being the breadwinner and whatnot. And that if the roles were reversed, it wouldn't be a problem. Like I wouldn't be allowed, so to speak, to complain about Shayna being home all the time while I'm providing, or that, people were saying like, oh, like she's complaining about that. That's what men have been doing since the dawn of time. And I'm like, hang on.
Yeah.
Not the same thing.
Pump the brakes.
Not the same thing. I get the sentiment, right? I work my ass off and I make all this money and she's at home. That is the surface level of what that is. Sure. But there's details to it that are important to address. So the first one that I pointed out to people, which I shouldn't be arguing with people in the TikTok comments, but I find myself doing it sometimes. So the first one being that she didn't sign up for that. So my pitch to her the whole time was that I'm going to go out and I'm going to be a millionaire. I'm going to use my content skills and my immense charisma to become this guy, to become this amazing, version of myself. I was selling her on the potential, essentially. And it wasn't a sales pitch. I'm just using that term, but it was more like, that's what she was signing up for. The person that I was at the beginning of our relationship when we first started dating was that like visionary, more like who I am now.
Yeah. It wasn't that you were going to be a millionaire. It was that you had the ambition. Like there was no 20, 30, whatever year old man that I was ever, which I wasn't really talking to anybody really because I couldn't be bothered, but no man that I knew was talking like that, was saying, I want this. I'm going to do this one day. I'm going to accomplish this one day. Like no one had goals like that and that I'd ever been with. So like it really intrigued me. I remember thinking like his family was going through a huge transitional time and he just loved he loves his parents so much and he wants to give them so much in one day. So he was so huge on like this idea of being able to like buy his dad a dream truck, and like just he would just had this vision of like who he could be and what he want, and I was just so drawn to that because I'm not even like that. Like I am not a visionary. I'm not someone who's like a goal oriented person. So I was just completely attracted to like just the idea of having so much confidence and faith in yourself that you're going to do it no matter what. So for me, that was what it was. It wasn't like I'm gonna be a millionaire and you're gonna be able to stay home and be spoiled and a trophy wife. Like that was not the pitch. It was more like he was just this person who just had so much he wanted to accomplish in life. And I was like, all right, you're 19 and I don't know if you know how hard that's going to be, but all right, well, I'll come along for the ride. So that was as far as what I was signing up for. It was that ambition, that goal oriented, nonstop
that
kind of
version
person.
of myself. Right. So like, she wasn't signing up for the lifestyle necessarily. She didn't even know that lifestyle was going to be a reality. That would be a stupid thing to bet on. Mm-hmm. But she was betting on that guy. She was betting on the guy that will stop at nothing to get what he wants.
Yeah.
And so who I was being at that low time in my life, who I was being when I was smoking weed, who I was being when I was playing video games and, starting Shopify stores, trying to avoid getting a real job. That's not the guy that I was. And so, when people say, oh, if the roles were reversed or whatever, it's like, well, if I was signing up for Shayna, who, is immensely, organizational and she cleans and she's takes care of her home and she's takes care of herself and all these other things. If she just stopped taking care of herself, if she just sat around in bed all day, if she just completely abandoned that version of herself that I was like, that I fell in love with, that I signed up for, I'd be a little pissed off. It's not like
there's no relationship in the world, romantically or not, that where you can give 100% and the other person gives 0. Like even your dog provides value to your life. You know what I mean? Like you can't, so when people made those comments, I'm like, well, duh. Like if the roles were reversed, of course it would be but like if you have a woman who's at home and you're working a hard, laborious, whatever job, bringing home all the money, and she's on the couch and the laundry's not done and the dishes are in the sink and the house is a mess and the kids haven't been fed and dinner's not done and the groceries need to be done. Like, yeah, you have every right to be irritated. And again, that's where you need to pause and have a meet. We used to have relationship meetings. It was
I actually have the term relationship meeting in my notes.
We did. And we lived with our best friends, Doug and Emily, who taught us so much about communication. They're just the most wonderful humans. I can't even talk about them without getting emotional. But we had these little whiteboards that we got off Amazon that we used for the YouTube channel we had. And we would literally sit there with whiteboards or a notepad. And we would, I forget what the criteria was, but it was like, write out 5 things that you're happy about in your relationship right now and write out 5 things that you feel like could use work or whatever. I don't remember the exact. And we would do that. And it was hard. We would sit there in silence. We'd write out all our things and then we'd talk about them. And sometimes he'd bring up things and I'm like, what? Like that's bothering you? Like, I didn't even know I was doing that. Or I'd bring up serious things. Like I really need help with this. And, I'm really concerned about your bank account and how we have this coming up. And, so just again, it's communication. I can't stress it enough. Like it's so important. So when you, there needs to be that balance, and I don't believe it's 50-50. I believe it's great. If it's 50-50, that's fantastic. But sometimes it's 80-20. And, sometimes it flips back to 20-80, you have to just be willing to communicate. And as long as you're both putting in the work, we're all human. We all fall off. We all make mistakes. We all go through hard times. But as a partner, you need to be willing to pick that person up, no matter how heavy they are. It's not easy. Relationships and marriage are work. It's work. Like people don't just have these fairy tale lives in it's just very rarely do people have that storybook life. And even then,
it never happens.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't know. I don't know a single person,
the falling in love and sailing off into the sunset is not real.
Yeah.
It is for the first 3 months. And then you start running into problems and then you have to start navigating those problems, and you treat it much less like a 2 people who have infatuation for each other, and you treat it more like an organization. You treat it more like how you would approach a problem in business, right? It's not like if 2 business partners had a problem, they would be like, well, let's just sell the business.
Yeah.
It's like, no, we have to keep the business going, which brings me to the next question that I received, and maybe you received, I don't know, but the question was, what were the keys that got us to where we are now? And so relationship meetings was on my list. So that was a good thing. But I think there's this more overarching sort of meta theme that I want to discuss, which is that the relationship or the marriage is a being in and of itself, right? So what happens when you get married or you commit to a long-term relationship is you say, okay, we're going to do this. What is this? This is the relationship, right? It is two people coming together and say, okay, we're going to maintain this. And if you treat it as if it is something that is outside of the both of you, right? Because if you treat your relationship like it's you and me, then it's going to be a constant battle of her wants versus my wants, her desires versus my desires, her needs versus my needs. And it becomes that game of tug of war. And that's never going to work out. That's never going to work out because you're just going to end up,
Which just makes
fighting
no
for
sense.
eternity.
At that point, live your own life. Like, why are you with somebody if you're not willing to come together? Like, Jordan Peterson made that analogy of like sharing your life with somebody and building a life is like taking a rope but intertwining them together. Now it's twice as strong. You have double the brain power. You have double the decision making. You have double the observational skills to figure out navigational things in life. And if you're going to approach a relationship and a marriage as a separate being, as a separate thing, like two people that just kind of like each other and have fun and just like, but want to do things, it's not gonna create something you're gonna be able to maintain for a long period of time.
Yeah. And I think that
under the guise of a marriage or a relationship
Right.
like that.
I think that Disney movies and stuff like that,
They're
sort
so
of,
responsible for the downfall of like our expectations in life.
just the culture that we live in has completely diluted the entire reason for man and woman coming together to do stuff together. It is not because you like each other. It is not because you enjoy spending time with each other. It is not because I think you're hot or you think I'm hot. It's not because you have good sex. That has nothing to do with it. That has absolutely nothing to do with it. What's going to create long-term success is compatibility. What's going to create long-term success is the fact that you two work better together than you do separately. That's the point. And if that's not there, it's not going to last, because whatever feeling that you're basing your entire marriage or relationship on is going to come and go. Whatever attraction that you have to them now, you might not have 10 years from now. Mm-hmm. And so once that fades, you're going to have to figure out how to make things work. And so if your foundation is, I'm really good at these things and you're really good at these things. I hate folding the laundry. She loves folding the laundry, right? She hates killing spiders. I don't mind killing spiders.
No killing spiders. We saved the spiders.
I killed the spiders.
No.
So you're getting my point. Compatibility is the thing that makes it last, because if you strip away all the feelings, if you strip away all the attraction, all that stuff is great. It's nice to be attracted to your partner. It's nice to be in love with your partner. It's nice to feel good about your partner. It's nice to like each other. It's nice to have great sex. That's all great. But at the end of the day, you two have to work better together than you do separately, regardless of how you feel. This is why the lowest divorce rate of all different types of marriages is arranged marriages, because the parents recognize compatibility. They see, this person works well with this person, so we're going to make it just makes sense, right? And so the attraction and the feelings become a byproduct of that compatibility, not the other way around. And so where I see, at least in my view, so many marriages fail is because you have two quarterbacks, not a quarterback and a wide receiver.
Yeah. Yeah. Establishing a map to what you want out of life. And not everyone's map's different. Not everybody wants to have the kids and the farm life and the family and the nuclear, and that's fine. Like, you don't need to have that. But the whole idea of approaching a relationship without it being a one thing is just going to set you up for failure. It's like, how do you can't maintain that if you're not building. It's like trying to build a pyramid, but instead of meeting at the top, you just go up. Like you have your needs and I have my needs, and then we just build up. It's like you have to come together to get to that point to create something. You know, if you don't, you're just going to just be separate the whole time. And then you're going to wake up one day and be like, what are we doing? You know, like that's the beauty of a marriage and a relationship, is building a life together, like having a witness to your own life and being partners and figuring that life is, the demands of life are just endless, you know, and it's such a naive way, like what Matt was just saying about like just relying on the attraction and how hot he is and your romance and all those things. It's like, yeah, those are beautiful and great and a huge part of like what brings you together. Cause I do believe there needs to be some sort of physical attraction. There has to be some sort of, you know, romance in a relationship for it to work as well. But, you know, what happens when tragedy hits? Like, are you really going to care about how hot your partner is? Are you really going to care about your sex life? Like, is that going to be what carries you through that horrific time? That's going to happen. You know, we all face tragedy. We all face incredibly hard things in life. Like, you have to find someone who you're compatible with, someone that understands your needs, that can be there for you in ways that other people can't. And that's kind of the idea of just, you know, finding that person and building a life with them, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So when, in terms of keys that sort of got us to where we are now, a lot of the reason that we did make it this far and we didn't, you know, call it quits when I was down in the dumps, or, you know, there was really no time where you were down in the dumps. But anyway, the reason that we made it this far is because at the foundation of everything, I am complimentary to her. She is complimentary to me. Mm-hmm. And that's why it works. That's why it works at the fundamental level. We have had our ups and downs in terms of how emotionally attracted we are to them, or how we feel about them on a particular day, or how, you know, all that other, all those other abstract things that people put way too much stock into. All that stuff ebbs and flows throughout the years and years of being together. But what doesn't change is who you are, what your strengths are, and how you both work together to go through life as a unit.
Right.
So cool. I think we nailed that one. So we're going to move on to the next one, which is fast adjustments, dealing with things now.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean by that?
No.
Like when there's a problem, we don't.
Yeah.
It never makes it.
We don't carry it into tomorrow.
We don't carry it into tomorrow.
I mean, some problems take time to resolve, but
right.
we don't let them, we don't sit on them and stew on them before we bring them up to each other. It's like, it's usually pretty immediate. Like I'll, you know, if I'm bothering him, like, or I'm not doing something I said I would, or whatever the case, like he'll tell me immediately, and vice versa, because it's why would you let it boil? You know, like I've witnessed relationships where the conversations and the topics ended in just throwing their hands up and just agreeing, because the only thing worse than agreeing was continuing that uncomfortable conversation. So what happens is you end up agreeing to something that you don't agree with, because out of spite and just to end the awkwardness and the horrible time that you're having. And then what ends up happening is years of resentment build up, frustration, and then you're just boiling over, and
and then it's a bigger explosion.
It's like Jordan Peterson's hiding things in the fog. Like, sure, like that landmine goes over there, and then the fog rolls in, and you can't really see the landmine anymore. And then another fight happens, and that's another landmine. But you know, all the fog rolls in, and you can't see them, and before you know it, you have 30 years worth of landmines, and you can't move anywhere without stepping on one. And then your whole relationship is nothing but landmines, because you never handled them when they were small little sparks.
Right.
So he and I always talk about whether it's something stupid like you need to put your keys in the drawer when you come home, because yes, I'm that crazy and OCD, or it's something as crazy as like, I really hate the way you talked to this person today. It made me uncomfortable, or whatever. You know, like it's
or
always.
You tried to start a podcast 3 times in a row, but the dogs were barking incessantly. And so I got angry and had to eat first before starting this podcast, which definitely did not happen.
No, it wasn't a real life example.
It was not a real life thing. Ago. So, it's just like when a problem arises, the worst thing you can do is sweep it under the rug. The worst thing you can do is pretend it's not there. The worst thing you can do is hide it in the fog, because conflict avoided is conflict multiplied. Mm-hmm. All you're doing is making that problem grow, and then it's just like a tumor, right? It's just like a cancer in the marriage, a cancer in the relationship. If it starts, this is tiny little thing and you can remove it and then you never have to think about it again, amazing. That's how you want to do it. But what happens is if you ignore it or you address it, but don't actually solve the problem, let's say you see the tumor and you're like, oh, let's like poke at it, whatever, right? But you don't actually get rid of it, then it's just going to grow. Then it's going to metastasize. Then it's going to spread into other areas. And then next thing you know, you're dead.
Yeah.
Right.
And there's nothing worse than like being in a frustrating argument with someone about something that just happened 3 minutes ago. And then they bring up something to fight back with you that happened 6 months ago that you never even knew bothered them until that moment that they kept it as ammunition to then throw in your face and you're just like, wait, what are we, you know what I mean? Like, so it's just, and let's be clear, not all problems can be solved, nipped in the butt and cleared out within 5 minutes. Like
but most of them can.
Most of them absolutely can. But the idea is to express how that one thing made you feel and how whether that person can control it or not at the time, like they might be angry about what happened and you might have to say to them, listen, like this really is upsetting me that you're acting like this, that this little thing, and that person might need to calm down and cool off. But the important thing is that you addressed it and said, hey, you did this earlier and it really bothered me. And they might be defensive. They might be mad or give excuses, but you need to calmly communicate how it made you feel. So that person now knows, because just like Matt alluded to before, the way that you give someone words of affirmation about something they do that you enjoyed, that you loved, that you appreciated, you also have to do on the flip side. Because how are you going to blame someone for doing something that bothers you if you never explained it to them that it bothered you? So then 6 months from now, they keep doing that thing and you're just bubbling over because you haven't talked about it. And now it went from the small little act that bothered you to this enormous cancerous thing that is now a huge point of contention in your relationship. So it's can come off as very like, corny and like over communication and just kind of like annoying. But trust me when I tell you, it's like, it's so worth it to be like, can you please, I know you were in a rush earlier and I know you had a lot going on, but it really bothers me that I cleaned the entire kitchen. And when I come downstairs, all your jujitsu stuff is on the counter.
What are you talking about?
I'm just thinking of a silly example. It's like, and you address what was going on. They were in a rush. They had a call in 30 minutes and they didn't have the time, but like, it just really bothers me. So next time, if you could just try to X, Y, or Z, I would appreciate it.
Yeah. And
there's nothing wrong with that. Like there's not, and that person, if you're with the person who receives that in a way that's defensive and angry, and then you got work to do, because that's the jujitsu bag is the least of your problems. Right. So it's unique to everybody, but I would certainly work on building a relationship to where communication is prioritized and it's heard. Whether or not you want to hear it, because sometimes there are things he certainly doesn't want to hear from me and vice versa. But it's important, because if you're not communicating, how do you expect that person to know what's going on? Mm-hmm. It's very simple.
Yeah, what you really want to avoid, I would say, here's a good litmus test to see, kind of where your relationship is at. This is where it's in like danger mode. Is if every single time you have an argument with your significant other, you're talking about things that have happened 10 years ago or 5 years ago or a year ago, right? If you're talking about things that are years and years old and you're bringing up things way in the past every single time you argue, or you're casting judgment about what type of person they are, or you always blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. That's huge red flags. And that's a huge issue with communication. That is a symptom of not solving problems as soon as they arise. Mm-hmm. So
it's so true.
Yeah.
And a little tidbit that I learned, Dougie taught us this, or maybe Dougie and Emily, one of the two. When you're in a disagreement or having a hard conversation or in an argument, avoid using the words never and always.
Yeah, you never do this.
Yeah, you always do this. You never do this. It's like, one, that's probably
when was
very
the
much
last
so.
time?
Well, one is probably not true at all. So what you're saying is just a lie. Like no one, you know what I mean? So just be more precise with your words and try to, the next time you're in that argument with somebody or just a uncomfortable conversation, just try to remind yourself to remove the words never and always. And you'll very likely keep the temperature down in that conversation, because people get less defensive when you accuse them of things that you rightfully so that aren't necessarily
right.
true.
Because then at that point, it's going to become a pissing contest.
Right.
It's going to turn into like, well, you said I never do this, or I always do this. I did this, 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 and this. So what do you mean I always do? And then it becomes like,
And then your point is proven wrong. And then you're probably annoyed. And most people don't have enough self-awareness to be like, all right, you're right. That wasn't true, blah, blah, blah. So it's just a little piece of advice that always stuck with me.
right. And this goes back to the relationship or the marriage being a being in and of itself. It is something that needs to be like, it's just like when you have a child, right? Like, and we don't have children, so I'm talking out of my ass. This is just an example, right?
I have zero experience with this.
When you have a child and you're making decisions in regards to the child, you're not thinking about what I want or what she wants. You're thinking about, okay, what's going to be best for the child, right? And you might differ on what that is, but ultimately that's what you're interested in. You're interested in what's best for the child. And so when you're approaching issues within a marriage or a relationship, the question is not what do I want or what does she want? The question is what's going to best facilitate the most smooth and happy marriage or relationship that we can possibly facilitate, you know?
Yeah. Like we try to every now and then, at least once a week, but it's not always the case, to have like just us time, date night, which our date night is usually like couch.
This podcast.
Yeah. Couch, Chipotle, movies, or if he'll even watch a movie, which is very rare. And sometimes we just don't want to. Like sometimes he wants to be up here working, and sometimes I want to be downstairs just like watching my show or what I want to watch, because we don't usually always want to watch the same things. But we know that if we don't spend actual quality time together, that's not going to feed our relationship. Spending the time, putting the phones down, being intentional with each other is worth the effort. And again, it sounds silly, but we don't always want to do that. We kind of want to be selfish with our free time and do what we individually want to do. That's just an example of, no, it's the night we said we were going to do that. We're going to do it. We're going to put the time in, and it's going to, in the long run, be worth it. And it's just an example.
Yeah. One of the most common cliches that I hear that is the most true thing when it comes to relationships is it's not you versus you. It is both of you versus the problem. Mm-hmm. And that is the moral of the story here. So with that being said, let's move on to the next sort of key that got us to where we are today. And that is going to be,
I love how you didn't even give me these keys. You didn't even tell me what you made the keys were, but they're spot on.
Yeah, 100%. You don't think I paid attention?
We didn't make these keys together. He's just rambling them off. I'm like, yeah, you're right. That's one.
The next one I have is brutal honesty, which I think we kind of covered, you know.
Yeah, it's pretty clear cut.
It's just being completely honest about, you know, how you feel. But again, you want to try to say things in a way that it's going to be best received, but you don't want to be
It's all in delivery.
It's all about delivery, right? And you don't want to be any less honest or any less real with how you're presenting it. You want to make sure you say what you're trying to say, but again, you have to be tactful in the way that you say it.
Right. Like and this isn't necessarily true, because I don't believe in, I don't get satisfaction out of kicking people when they're down. In fact, it makes me cringe inside. But he got to a point that he was so low that I had every right to be like, you are a lazy piece of shit. You've done nothing at all. Like you want me to be with you? You think that I want to be with somebody like you? Blah, blah, blah. Like I could have said all those things, but one, I wouldn't have, but two, it's
you would have been, you would have been within your right to.
Yeah, for sure. I had every right to say that, but I know well enough to know that that's not going to communicate, starting to get my point across. But again, it's the delivery. It was, what's going on? Like, look at you. Like, this is what you do all day. Like, this is who you want to be for us, who you want to be for me, who you want to be for our future kids one day. Like, look at all you're capable of. Look at all the things you've done in the past. And this is are you proud of who you are? Like, and it wasn't look at you. It was like a sincere, like, you're better than this. Like, you can be more than this, and if you can't find it in you to do it for me, do it for yourself. Kind of conversation. You're saying the same thing, but you're saying it in a different way. And again, your delivery, truth is important. Truth is vital. You don't have anything without it, quite literally. So again, you can say the truth in multiple ways. And I think delivery is certainly a very important part of the truth.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What's the next one?
I wrote down having clearly defined roles. I think that mitigates confusion.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of goes back to being complementary to each other, but also having an awareness of that complementariness.
I don't know.
Either way, you get the point. you want to be aware of your strengths and weaknesses, and so that you can clearly define your roles within a relationship.
I just feel like the term roles kind of triggers people. It's like,
I don't care. It's true.
No, and I, of course, but to kind of reiterate that, like, your roles aren't like you take out the trash, I don't do it. You know what I mean? It's not that. It's like it's the analogy you use with the football field, like with a football game, is perfect. And I don't know anything about football, so I'm going to butcher this, but you can't have two quarterbacks. You just can't. You will never win a game with two quarterbacks. You need other players on that field to get that ball to where it needs to go. The ball is your marriage, is your road, is your end goal. So if I mean, I'm certainly not going to sit up in this office all day and create content, because that role I will fail miserably at, and we will get nowhere. We will be dead in the water for a very long amount of time. He certainly is not going to be responsible for a home and keeping things clean and tidy and organized and shopping and groceries and cooking, and that's not going to be him, because that's not his strength. It's like, find your strengths within each other and use those to your advantage to get to where you want your marriage to be.
Right, exactly. So we're not telling you what your role should be. We're not saying
it's very unique to every relationship.
100%.
You just have to agree on them and feel good in where you're
clearly define, like, actually decide what that is. You can't just like wing it, and like, maybe you can just figure out and like stumble around and see that, oh, like, she's better at this, I'm better at this, I guess I'll just keep doing this. But actually having a conversation about it and being like, I'd much rather be doing this and you hate doing this, so why don't I just do this and you do that, because you're much better at this and I suck at that, so why don't you just, cool. And obviously that changes over time. Like, you keep that dialogue going, but actually having an awareness and agreement. And like she said, it's not about the little things like taking out the trash or like, this is your job or that's your job. If you see something, do it, right? If there's dishes in the sink, wash the dishes. If you have time to wash the dishes and there's dishes in the sink, you should wash the dishes. It doesn't matter who's better at it, right? But when it comes to stuff like the laundry, she knows way more about like how to make things smell clean and be clean and not have colors mix. And like, I don't pay attention to that. So my time is better spent in a position to where we're going to, I'm going to utilize my strengths to the best. Me spending 3 hours a week on laundry versus spending 3 hours a week in my office doing work, what time is better spent? And like you said, vice versa. You flip it around. If you're up here in my office editing videos and I'm doing laundry, that is a waste of our time.
Right. And I think it's worth just saying that you appreciate each other for your roles. We don't hold them over each other. Well, I do this and you do that, and that's just the way it is. It's like, You've been working really hard in your office all day today. Like, I really appreciate how hard you're working, and I know you're doing everything you can, blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
And back to the beginning of him appreciating when he goes in his drawer and, oh, his shirt's clean. I just wore that last week. How'd that get there? Oh, that's because my wife folded it and cleaned it and made sure it was exactly like those little things, like words of affirmation, guys. Like, it goes a very long way. And furthermore, it makes you want to do those things more. When you're appreciated for what you're doing, a simple thank you for doing the laundry today is so great. It wasn't hard. It didn't hurt him to say it. And I know he appreciates it. And then when I do the laundry next time, I'm not like, this fuck doesn't even care about what I do. And, it must be nice to open your drawer and your clothes are just there waiting for you. Blah, blah,
you definitely
blah.
say that to me sometimes.
I sometimes do. But it's a great way to avoid resentment is my point. So
the thing I was going to interrupt you about, but I patiently waited like a good boy.
I said no.
Is that roles one's not better than the other, right? And I see this a lot when people talk about traditional gender roles. People think that going out and making money is objectively better or contributes more.
Sorry, I just yawned, but like kept the straw like halfway in my mouth while I was yawning. And I caught it in the viewfinder. It looked so weird. I was like,
someone's gonna screenshot that one.
This is why I'm not allowed to be on this side of the camera. Anyway, I'm so sorry. That was rude. Continue.
But yeah, I see when people object to the idea of traditional gender roles, they get, and again, I'm not telling you what your gender roles need to be. I'm just saying, like, when people talk about gender roles, they get upset because they think that making money is better than taking care of the home or cooking or cleaning. Not the case. They're both important. You need to eat. You can't live. Have you ever seen hoarders? Like that That's a miserable existence. Like you need both to succeed in life and to fulfill, to become the best versions of yourself and to have a happy home and to raise a family. You need both of them. You can't have one without the other. So one is not more important than the other. Sure, you can pay someone to do all this stuff, but like
you can't pay them if you don't have someone working to do to make the money to pay the people. Like you have to have a balance in your home. You have to have, just as you would in a team. It's the same thing. You have to know what is expected of each other. And those things change throughout it's not the same thing as it was day one as it is year 7. Like when you have kids, roles change, things maneuver and change and manipulate.
Yes, you change all the diapers.
Right. What?
Yep. I'm going to take your first answer.
No.
I'm going with your first answer. But yeah, one role is not better than the other. So stop acting like
this isn't a tit for tat. If you approach any relationship as a scoreboard, like a tit for tat, well, I did this, so now you need to do that. Like he used to do, you don't really do this anymore, but he used to do the thing that was like, well, since I did this, will you go do that? And I would be like, no, but I will go do what you just asked because you asked and I'll go do it.
Yeah,
but I'm not going.
I also catch you doing that all the time too. Where it's like, well, I did this, so I think that you should.
No, I don't do that. He's full.
You 100%
he's full of
do
crap.
that.
I hate that.
You 100%
the tit
do
for
that.
tat scorekeeping thing irritates It's so petty to me. It's so gross to me.
Oh, well, I'll remind you the next time you do that because you absolutely do that.
When was the last time I did that?
Okay. All right. We're going down that road. So having clearly defined roles. And then the last one that I have is just being on the same page about what is important, right? Being on the same page about what you value and where you're trying to go at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. Like what we wanted 5 years ago is not what we would say that we want now. So it's important to communicate those things. It's important to talk about those things. It's important to make sure that those things are known. And it's just like any other goal, right? Like you have your goals within your business. You have your goals when it comes to fitness, and you have goals within your marriage and within your relationship. And if you write down those goals once, or you say to yourself, I want to do this once, and then you don't go back to it, you don't remind yourself, you don't, take the daily, monthly, weekly practices to remind yourself of what you're doing this for, then you're not going to ever achieve those things. You're not ever going to, get anywhere because you forgot about it essentially. And so when it comes to your relationship goals or your marriage goals or your family goals, for us, it's having kids and, living in a big, beautiful home and, her not having to work, which by the way, if you don't want her to work anymore, go to notmattgraham.com and apply for Growth Accelerator. And anyway, so those are our goals. And, some of the goals have stayed the same consistently over the last 7 years, but some of them have changed. I think our attitude towards children has changed a lot. In the first 3 to 4 years, I'd probably say that we were leaning towards wanting to have kids, but we weren't sure. I think it was more like
I definitely wasn't sure. You were like, yeah, probably.
I've always wanted to have kids. Like I remember being 10 years old at SeaWorld, and I don't know why I remember it at SeaWorld, but my aunt, we were in the car. We had just come down here. I lived in Vermont, and we came down here for a vacation, and she asked me if I wanted to have kids, and I was 10 years old, and I said, yes, I do want to have kids. And she was like baffled by that. And so now I've always wanted to have kids, and some days less than others. But in the last, I would say like 18 months to 2 years, we have been like, let's have kids. Well, I have been like, let's have kids, And so, but obviously we wanted to get married first. And so we did that. We are now married, and now it's baby time. You're still on the fence.
No, I'm not on the fence. It's just, I think it's a little bit more of a commitment for the female than it is the man.
Yeah.
For at least the first, I'd argue, 2 years.
It's for sure. Yeah. But
not
we'll figure
that
it out.
It's not a commitment that I'm not willing or wanting to make. It's just terrifying. You know what I'm saying? But I think I know for a fact, I can't prove this, but I know for a fact that once we have kids, the only regret I'll have is not having them sooner.
100%. I mean, I already feel that way.
I know.
Because I feel like we could have like 7 or 8 kids if we had started, Anyway, so I completely lost my train of thought.
Nothing else on your outline that you wanted to talk about?
Not really. I remember what I was going to say. Just to sort of mitigate your fears is that, and I've said it to you before, a lot dumber people
It's so true.
have raised some pretty good kids.
Yeah.
So
It's very
we
true.
can figure it out. But yeah, I mean, that's all I had for the podcast. There were some other questions that I got that were a little more pertaining to me, but I don't think we have to go into that right now. I think we can,
I don't remember any like that.
you didn't see the outline of the podcast.
Oh, I thought you meant comments. That were
No,
pertaining to you.
I wrote down some things that people asked me that were sort of similar to our last conversation, but also a little more like on the personal development side of things. But that would be a weird transition at this point. And plus we've been going for, I think, more than an hour. So anyway, I think it's time to call it a wrap. Or is that what you say?
Call it. I think it's time to wrap it up.
Wrap it up.
That's
wrap
what
it
it
up.
is.
All right. So be sure to like and subscribe. Be sure to follow the podcast. I think that's what you do on Spotify. And then whatever you do on Apple Podcasts, that's what you should do. Give us a rating.
Give us a rating.
Right.
Ratings is on
Yeah.
Apple, I think.
Yeah.
I haven't used Apple in a long time.
I just use a app that like distributes it to all the platforms. So I don't even know what the thing is. I mostly make it for YouTube. So
When are you posting this?
Wednesday.
Wednesdays are pod days?
I think we're gonna make it the pod day. I would like to have, I don't know. You guys let me know what you want to do. If you want me to keep bringing her on, if you want me to have some of my,
I want to do a podcast on know yourself quiz.
yeah, we want to do
I
some
think
like
that's
personality.
wildly important. Like
some personality stuff.
Huge thing that people miss in any and all relationships. Like it
Yeah.
needs to be talked about more. For
Yeah,
sure.
I think I want to do more podcasts where it's like us talking to each other.
Yeah.
Like, cause the last two, it's been like us talking at the camera, but obviously there's some conversation, but I would like to facilitate a little more conversation, maybe do some prompts
Yeah.
and discuss things, maybe go into some uncharted waters.
Like current events.
I don't know.
I don't know if I'd ever care to do current events. But you have some interesting folks lined up to be guests. So you won't always be me. I won't always be the wife on the podcast.
Unless you guys want to just be the Shayna and Matt podcast, in which case we can do that.
We can call it the Grammys.
Wow. Wow. Nice work. All right.
This is my reach.
That's the end of this podcast. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We'll see you in the next one.
Bye, guys.